So our next speakers are Nida Ahmad and Marina Díez. They're gonna talk about game design and UX design. Who does what, and how both of these roles can do a better job together. Can you jump on and join us and turn on your videos? Hey,
Hello.
ooh, lovely. So where are you calling from?
So I'm in Germany. I'm in West Germany at the moment.
Nice. Is it a real fire? Because
Yeah.
or is it? Oh, it's not as because we're so used to the fake
Yeah, I
backgrounds.
know,
I'm excited to see a real fire.
right? Well, this was a fireside talk, so
That's awesome. And you, Nita, where do you call from?
I'm in London right now, so it's evening for us as well.
All right. So I'll just let you introduce yourselves and just take on the show. Do you need anything from me?
We finish at is it past, right? That's
You have until, let's see, 11:40. So for you, math, it would be 5:40, right? But at 40. But I'll book you if I see that you're going beyond. Don't worry. All right, I'm excited. Thank you for being here.
thank you so much for having us.
so. I guess I'll get started. So yeah, hi everyone. It's great to be here, and thank you for having us. So today we'll be talking about game design and UX design and why they're super important to have and consider when you're making a game, but also how both teams can actually collaborate with each other to make a better game. So I'm Nida. I'm a UX designer in Netspeak Games, currently working in the mobile space. I've been in the industry for just under 3 years. I previously studied psychology, and now I'm a UX person, and now I'm here today. Marina.
So, hello everyone. I'm super happy joining this today. Thank you so much for inviting us. I'm a game designer, and I normally define myself as an emotional game designer. And my background is a bit weird because I studied modern languages at uni. So I was an specialist in Italian and German literatures and languages. And then I also work in the fashion industry. And then I moved to the games industry later on. So, it's a particular path in this industry, but I'm super happy being here. And normally I'm working for my own company that is called Free of Caps Games. We are based in London, and we are an ethical and diverse games studio. And then I also work for a company in Helsinki called Wondershop. And then I'm the lead designer for the game Dordogne from Je ne sais quoi Studios in France.
Awesome. So we thought we'd start with just talking a little bit about our roles. So Marina, do you want to talk a little bit more about what it means to be a game designer?
Yeah. So basically, as I said, I define myself as an emotional game designer. I'm also an expert on game feel, and in my roles, normally it depends on the team and the kind of game that we are making. But normally, my role comes to things like, for example, figuring out the kind of emotions we want the players to feel when they play our games. So when I need to create some systems for games, above all in projects that are just kicking off. First of all, I sit down and ask the creative director the kind of emotions they feel we want to have in the game. So when we start from that, we figure out the rest, basically. And then in game feel, it comes above all in my own games that I really, really enjoy creating atmospheres and to play with the different elements that you can have in a game, like audio, cameras, lights, to see what the kind of magic that I can do, just placing different elements. And that's also a lot of what we are going to talk about today, Nida and I, that how changing elements and the different elements that we have both in our different roles can really make the difference in the kind of games that we make later.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear about your role because I can definitely see some overlaps with the job I have. So in my current role, I'm working at a really small company of around 20 people. So my responsibilities are fairly diverse. I do the traditional UX design stuff, so like prototyping, wireframing, like what's the word? Working on feature briefs, sorry, and kind of unpacking them and seeing like what questions can I answer from like a player perspective, like what things are they going to be looking for when they're interacting with the system. I also do a bunch of user research, so I'm building up our user research arm. So this is things like participant recruitment, getting our study and testing pipeline going. And then I also contribute to game design as well. So again, working with our team to unpack features, but also I'm working on like the first time user experience and how do we get those emotions and meaning going, right? So because especially with a free to play game, people are very likely to drop out because they haven't really paid for it. So it's like, how do we keep people interested and actually enjoying the experience that they have? So it's a very broad spectrum role, whereas at a big company, I'm sure UX is much more defined and much more specific in that sense. So Marina, I wanted to ask you, have you worked with a UX person before, or from a game designer perspective, are there any UX responsibilities you think you've picked up that you do in your day-to-day role?
So basically, I think that in my own personal case, I really never worked with a UX person directly, like above all, because my projects are projects that are always, just kicking off. And I think that sometimes teams tend to just give priority to other roles, which is okay. But I think that it's good that we are seeing more and more tendency to hire other kind of professionals into teams, because like even game designers, I think game designers are now like the most popular role that we probably have in the games industry. Everyone thinks that we are all game designers and only that, and there's sometimes no space for other kind of roles. But I think that it's slowly changing, and I'm super happy to see other kind of people getting on board, because like I talk a lot about labels in the games industry, and I think that when we give priority to just one label, many people remain outside of that label and they don't think that they are suitable for working in the games industry. So I'm, like as I was saying, I never really had the opportunity to work with a UX person, or a person that defines themselves as a UX designer. I had some friends around that were UX and UI people, but basically we really didn't work together. It was just me that when I had some doubts and some concerns about the kind of task that my jobs required from me, that I didn't know how to proceed, because there were typical tasks from people that are expert on those fields. So I could ask around, but like I couldn't really work yet with a UX person, but I hope I will do it in the future.
That's so interesting, because like even at my company, we don't really have like an official game designer role. But we have a bunch of people in different disciplines that have a lot of design experience. So my job is fairly holistic in that sense. So anyone can pitch a design idea if they want. And then I'll be the one coming in and figuring out what problem is this feature trying to solve and how would this better the player experience. But I also consider a lot about like, well, what are the business needs of the company, right? Like, are we looking at retention? Are we looking at engagement? And all that type of stuff from like the product manager's perspective, and kind of bring all those thoughts and priorities together when we're talking about this feature. I think when we usually talk about UX as a job, it's very much discussed as like a glue, like bringing all the different teams together. So for us personally, like having a game designer or not having a game designer at the moment is fine, because we can work highly collaborative in that way. And also what I really like about the job is, as a UX person, I am very much just a problem solver and looking at how we can make a better experience. So even if I'm not someone that's highly technical and doesn't know like Unity, for example, even though I'd love to learn someday, my focus is more about like, how do we devise the best solution given our time, resources, budget, and things like that. Whereas I guess if there was a game designer on board, my role might be even more specific and probably working closely with people like you. Having said that, do you think there are ways that game designers and UX people can collaborate together? And have you had any experiences of that as well?
I think absolutely. Like, I can't like it basically, or talk comes a lot as well of one day that we had a point of view in common, that it was from a conversation on Twitter where I noticed that I was doing lots of UX work, because the kind of game design that I do is what I call user centered, and my whole point about my design is to make people feeling good, and that's also what our UX person wants to do, right? Like to give to the player the best experience, and that's also a lot of what I do. So I really think that we need to collaborate, all of us together. And you said also, you mentioned something super interesting, that it was the fact of, for example, that you don't think you have now like the knowledge of Unity and all that kind of stuff. And I think that that's a field that many people have in the games industry. And I think while I'm a little bit experienced in Unity, and obviously I'm not a programmer, so my code skills are limited, but while I'm doing that, I also think that it's another kind of thing that stops people from feeling real game designer, game developer, or whatever. Like um, the difficulty that some tools come with, and they are super popular. Like, for example, sometimes you can feel that if you don't know Unity, you are not a games person, and you can have lots of game knowledge, but if you are not an expert on Unity, you feel like a fail, and it's not true. So I come into the role of UX or game designer, I think that we have much more knowledge than what we thought beforehand. And then I think that also all of us, we should collaborate and share our knowledges together, because game development is not just a task of one person, but the effort of a whole team with different experiences, different knowledges, and different things to contribute with.
Yeah, I agree. Like the collaborative nature is really important. Like it's important not to be precious of like your job title or the tasks that you do, and it can be something really easily, like something that I fell into, if I'm honest, very early on in my career, around being like, well, no, I've got to do the wireframing because I'm the UX person, and it's like, well, that's not how game development works. It's, as a UX person, your job is to provide your team with the tools and like the UX type of thinking to make their job much easier, but also make a better experience together. So that's why you'll end up with different types of UX designers. You'll get certain UX designers who do just push out wireframes, and that's a great job. Or you get UX designers who do like UX strategy, like Celia does. Or the type of work that I do, for example, is like a lot of meetings most of the time, like 50, 60, 70% of my time is in meetings where someone will come to me with a design. And my job will be to kind of reviewing it from the player perspective. But also because I work closely with the product and marketing teams, I've learned a lot about what our audience wants, what types of games they're playing, what their game literacy is, and I can feed that knowledge back into a feature. So for example, if I know that our players are super hardcore, based on the marketing research and the product research, then then I could say about a feature, hey, maybe we could tweak the game balancing around here, or maybe the flow doesn't have to be as handholdy around here, and we can adapt that as we wish. And then I also help them make key design decisions around that. But all of this does center around the key pillar of usability. So I'll think about a lot of psychological principles, whether that's stuff around biases, but also a lot of UX and usability principles, like around consistency and things like that, to ensure like the feature is in line with the rest of the game. And like you're saying, the game feel, right? Because you don't want the feature to stand out and be a fairly jarring experience. So there's a lot of like balancing work I do as well, like in maintaining that type of consistency. And it's not that like UX people are vision holders of the game, but you are, because of the position you're in a good place to see what's happening with the different systems and the features and the aesthetics of the game, whether that be like game feel or the art, to know like, is this a coherent message we're creating and a coherent sense of meaning as well, I think, for the experience, just so people like feel immersed, or like not like they're playing two different games, I guess. But like that's usually like closer to the end, or like an ongoing thing. With your job, do you find like it changes depending on like the stage of development you're at?
Yeah, I think like, for example, like in projects that are just starting, you can see that you need to put much more effort on thinking what kind of experience you want to offer. But it's really an ongoing process. It's not something that is start like at the beginning or at the end. Like hopefully you don't leave your user experience by the end. So because then if you do it, you have a problem, in my opinion. But you know, like I think it's some like it's something that you need to take into account since the very beginning. And like the thing is that game development is iterative, right? And that also means that all the elements that you have in the game are probably also going to be iterated sooner or later. And that means also like user experience is gonna change because maybe the game design changes. And if the game design changes and you are offering different mechanics, user experience is also different because you have different elements. And you know, it's kind of like the same, goes together into the same direction, and everything is, it's like a different pieces of a puzzle. Everything needs to you know, like fit into each other somehow. And yeah, so basically it's, for me, it's a process that is from start to end.
Yeah, I think that process thing is very much like it, again, it depends on the company you have, but also like the goals that you have. So like from a UX person, my first task would be like to actually research the problem. So this could be like playing existing games, unpacking what the actual problem is, how did it rise, who is it impacting, how is it impacting them, but also working with like the key stakeholders in our team. So is that the product manager, the CEO, the game lead, and thinking about like, okay, well, how much time do we have to fix this problem? What data have we had come in? So like if I've done previous playtests, let's review that again. Like what were the high priorities that led to this problem occurring? And also, like I said, looking at other games is actually okay, because you can see how other companies have attempted to solve a similar-ish problem or like adapted a similar feature and kind of do a review of their ones as well. So like, what are they doing well? What can we learn? And what can we actually do better for our game, especially if it's a similar demographic as well. And then I'd probably chat with the rest of the wider team as well. So anyone working on design or anyone working on that feature team, and discussing, okay, what is this feature going to be? So it's probably going to be like workshops, maybe some whiteboarding sessions, even remotely. There's tools like Miro and things like that. And really going through the design brief if we have one. Again, we're small, so we're really fast paced and adaptive. So sometimes there's not even a clear design brief, but maybe creating one that gets us all on the same page so we know the problem we're fixing and the feature we're making. And then I work closely with our technical and UI designers to figure out what the solution is. So this is when we'll start using things like Figma, maybe Sketch. I know some companies use Adobe XD, is it? Yeah, to come up with a wireframe. And here we'll kind of explore all the different types of solutions, the different types of states, also tracking like what tech requirements are there. So I guess this is probably something game designers do as well, I guess, is like, you know, what assets do we have already? What can we reuse? What new things do we have to make? And then kind of pitching the idea. Like I think a big part of the UX job is, and probably similar to the game design job, is like you are pitching your ideas to other people, and you've got to do a lot of like justification type work, hopefully evidence-based, that's the aim. So again, using data from playtests or market research and things like that to say, I think this solution is the best given our limits, which are like, again, team, resources, time, and things like that, because you're never going to have the perfect solution, I think. But this is a solution we want to test as our hypotheses. So it's really important to like incorporate the scientific method in that way. And that's the appropriate method, I think, or like approach, I think, that we should be using more to game design, where we have iterative development and working closely with the game designer on that, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree with all what you said, and it's super interesting that you started talking about research, and like I'm sure that like the 99% of a team needs to be researching the whole time. And like sometimes, for example, in my case, I can be stuck with some game design thing, and researching helps me massively to, like find cool solutions, taking as a base stuff that it's already been done. So yeah. And then also you were talking about like the the pitching, and like in general, working in teams is pitching all the time, but especially in game development, I feel sometimes like probably like making films, where you have lots of different professionals involved in the thing. And like, again, I feel that we have like a kind of like very limited head sometimes of what a game development team looks like. And for example, in my last projects, I had the opportunity to work with very different people that I really, like, I never thought that it was people that maybe was going to be included in a game development team. So it's something that you only see when you have more, you acquire more experience. Like, for example, in the one of my teams, we work with a pedagogy person because we are focused on kids. And I also work with people experiencing kids trauma and attachment, or people like, for example, in another project in Dordogne, we've been working with a person that was an expert on fables from Dordogne in France. So, like it's again that we like, it's how we classify roles. And I also feel that lots of what you say has to do with how people do things differently, but to the same scope. So it doesn't really matter how do you do it, but like to do it. And then also you said about scientific methodology, and I completely agree with that. That I think it's super important to take that into account, and having that as a base, you can then improvise. But it's important to look at the data and apply all of that to whatever you do.
Yeah, and it's a lot of that data comes through, like, at least for me, like, comes closely working with the game designers to figure out what the test will be, and like what build we're testing and what feature are we testing. So like in my previous jobs that I've done, I sat down with game designers and said, hey, you said you wanted to do a test, let's figure out what this test would be. So let's figure out what the testing objectives are, what are the success criteria. So if 50% of players do a certain thing, is that enough, or do you want more players to do it? Do you want people to be able to find a certain thing in this feature? What do you count as like a fail state? What types of specific questions do you want answered? So if you want a questionnaire after, what types of questions are you looking for? And I wouldn't usually directly put the questions that they ask into the questionnaire, because they obviously need to be adjusted considering biases and things like that. But I make sure that everyone is part of that process of being part of the testing. And then if there's tests running, then if they can, then have them sit in, whether that be like through shadowing, like through a screen, like some bigger the companies have, or just being part of the playtest, but like on silent in the remote call, for example, and you can't see their face or hear them, just so they can see how the UX process actually works. And they can see how they get like direct feedback from players, I think. So when I'm talking about scientific method, it doesn't really have to be this big, scary academic thing. If anything, it's like helping your team like operationalize and find common grounding. I think in the language that we have, like game development is really complex when it comes to its terminology. And I'm still learning a lot of game development terms, but something I really enjoy is like helping teams find their own language. So for example, if I'm doing a persona project, like creating personas for a team, I'll usually run a workshop with them and we'll come up with the names for the personas together. So, but I go by the principle of like, we don't really use human names. So like, because again, there's a bias of like, but if a certain person has, if a certain persona has a certain name, they're probably going to be a certain type of person. So we tend to come up with names like, oh, the hunter, the role player, and things like that. But it makes sure that everyone is part of that process with all of that. So being highly collaborative is really important, but as a game designer, how do you think UX people can help you with your day-to-day job, make your process better?
Basically, I think that UX people also, like in the case of my own role, as more again, like I'm not a technical game designer. So for example, in my project in Helsinki, it's my lead designer who's the expert on technical side. So as an emotional game designer, I think UX people have lots of sensibility to being able to work with me into that and to see if I'm right with my guessings in terms of if a feeling in a mechanic are right together, or because sometimes it can happen that I thought it happened once that I thought that a mechanic was very cool to express a very soft emotion. Like, I don't know, I don't remember the emotion exactly right now, but I remember it was something related to sadness or something very soft and light. But like the mechanic, how it felt, I think it was a tapping or something like that into a screen. It didn't feel soft at all. And like people that are UX people notice those kind of things. And I think you can imagine that this is part of a game development day to day, but it really is. And for example, if you place a camera in the wrong position, a UX person can help me to say, hey, this is not right here, it feels not good, or you can improve this movement by putting this here or there. And yeah, I think like I mean, I would love to have the opportunity to have a UX person around in my teams, just to like confirm that my guesses are true. Because like sometimes I think we all have kind of knowledge, but obviously a person that is an expert on that is much more helpful than me looking on Google. Is this UX wise correct? But it's something that happens, that a lot of students think that game development and game design comes like from when you were born game designer or game person, and it's not true. Like, it's lots of Google searching, really.
No, I agree. Yeah. So like even I only started properly playing games, like other than childhood, was after I joined the industry. Like I kind of fell in, like a lot of people do, but I wasn't hugely passionate about games till I joined. So yeah, you can join at any point and you can still contribute in different ways. I think it's really interesting what you said about the UX person kind of being able to figure out things that you might have missed. I think a big part of the UX person's job is kind of be working with the game designer to communicate the designer's intent, and kind of that's where a lot of the interface and work that comes out, right? Like, so what interaction system are we using, what's our UI design and things like that, and we can support you in that process, and also answering your questions. So like, at least on the user research side of things, like user researchers also do a lot of exploratory research. So if there's a certain theme, or like we know like in a couple months down the line we're going to start working on a feature, let's start doing some exploratory research. So let's see what information is out there about this feature. Maybe we can run some internal focus groups with people who play with those types of features from similar games and see what they're looking for, and use that to inform our development. But it is very much an iterative and ongoing, and to be honest, fairly slow process, right? Like building that relationship takes time. And I think we were talking about this earlier, right? Like our jobs as design people, or like people who care about player experience, we need to build trust with each other, but also the wider team. And that can take a really long time. I know you had some thoughts on this, so it'd be good if you expand on that.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting and beautiful what you say just now about building trust with each other. Because I feel like like I feel that then 80% of the games industry is not just technical people, and above all, I feel that marginalized folks have it much more difficult to define their roles. And I think that it's better than just like uh, put ourselves into some game development models. uh, it's better to just share between us. And I feel that lots of what I am as a game designer is not the games that I play, or the technical knowledge that I have. Like, I obviously, like everyone, I read the game design books and all of that. But then at the end of the day, what it helps me the more to be who I am as a game designer is to take into my creative process, all the things that I live in my life and how I feel as a person, and how, like, to pay attention to what others feel in games, and to collaborate with different people, but sometimes for expressing some things, or for figuring out some kind of features in a game, you don't need just to have like super complex technical terminology, but sometimes it's even better when you can define those kind of things with normal life terms, like stuff that we all go through. And it happens a lot in my teams that is very surprising, but like for some people it works more the technical side, but generally we all understand each other when we talk as a human beings, and we leave behind our roles or titles or whatever, like, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good, like a good example of that. It's like, so as UX people, it's really important for us to push for accessibility, and kind of ensure that our games have features around that are considerate of that. And it very much comes down to like, that like misconception that UX is UI and we can fix UX through UI. And it's like there's a lot more deeper layers to that, including accessibility. With a lot of accessibility features, you've got to start thinking about it early, especially at the prototyping phase, so that you're considerate of these different types of player needs, player barriers, and like ensuring that we as a team try to avoid creating a lot of those barriers where that's unintentional, sorry. Because it very much is, we are making games for everyone, and that accessibility is a huge part of that, right? Like whether or not you have a disability, it's like a lot of accessibility features will still make a game for you much better. Like as a player, like even though I don't have any physical disabilities, having like various types of input helps me a lot. Or like things like subtitles are really useful for me, even though like I can read fine, I can hear fine, and things like that. So yeah, being really human-centered in your approach and taking inspiration from a variety of areas is really important. I know this is something you do as well with your like emotional game design stuff, is look outside of the games industry for inspiration. And how do you go about doing that for like good player experiences?
Basically, just before getting into that, I just while you were talking, I was thinking that actually I think that user experience is people that help game developers to be more human in some way. Because what you were saying about accessibility and making games for everyone, that's exactly what I want to do while I'm emotional game designer. And for example, in terms of that I'm not a UX person, right? But for example, we had in one of my projects, we have a problem that we had an interface that was not good for example, children that maybe had physical disabilities in their hands. That's a lot of stuff that I saw like that last year when I was working for a charity in the UK called GUXS. I had the opportunity to visit many charities that were dedicated into video games and with kids that had physical disabilities. And when you see that kind of stuff, and you see the games are not adapted to everyone, but then you're a game designer, it's like we can solve this. And that's also lots of what UX does as well, that to say to game people, hey, like this is a barrier that you're putting here, and it's easy to solve. So, and it doesn't cost you money. Like it's wrong when you think that making games for everyone costs you more money. It's the same stuff as saying that animating women is more expensive. So exactly.
It's not more expensive, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, yeah. And then about my experience as an emotional game designer, it's because I really wanted people to feel with my games and to be calm and not always happy, because I think we sometimes kind of we are a bit confused between games and having fun. I see a lot of people defining games are games having fun, and it's true, like fun, but not fun in the terms of you're happy and all the time like, oh, my game, like in terms, I think people want to say fun in terms of engaging. And I think that's also lots of work done by the UX people to help game designers to make our features and our mechanics even more engaging. And then in my process, I always think a lot on how I think the user is gonna feel better playing my game, and that's how I build around that I take my own emotions. That I don't recommend this because every person is different, right? But as a model, I first take how I feel about certain stuff, and then uh, like I research and talk around people and observe them and listen to them to see how can I tweak my first mechanics to make them more integrative into other people, so I can reach a bigger range of people with the stuff that I'm making.
Yeah, I agree with you on the fun thing, because fun is such a loaded, heavy, abstract term. And I think part of UX is kind of attempting to, at least, like breaking fun down as a concept. So when we're testing and you as a game designer ask me, like, I want to check if this player thinks the game is fun. My job from like the UX end would be like, okay, what do you mean by fun? Are you talking about that they're engaging with the mechanics, like you said? Are you saying that they're feeling a certain way at certain points of the journey? Because then we can track that as well. Are you saying that they're having fun in terms of, so I have this when I play a lot of FPS games, right? Like I can end up fairly irritable and annoyed when I lose, but then I'll still have fun and I'll come back and I'll play it again and again and again. So again, it's translating what you're trying to say into something that we can test. All right. And it's choosing the right research tools and methodologies to test those concepts for you as well. So I think the way I see UX is like kind of going a layer deeper than the game designer, looking at player like mental models, looking at psychology and human factors design, accessibility, and also diversity and inclusion, like you said, like trying to bring all these really important topics together when we're thinking about game development. Just because game design as a job is already so broad and vast, it's like I can provide you with this type of specialist tool, I guess, and type of support. But having said that, like the fact that game design is so broad, do you have any resources for any UX person that wants to learn more about game design?
I think like I was gonna say like basically live experiences, and like an exercise that I've done a lot while I was studying my master in game design was going for like when I was in the street, for example, I was trying to imagine how to make experiences from the elements that I was seeing them, and how would I convey them together to um, make like an interesting experience. And like I recommend that, like playing with the world, right? Like like we have lots of playful elements around, and sometimes we want to find all the knowledge in books, and I love books. I have so many of them. So for example, one cool source is to read lots of books, but also I would say like experiment yourself. And I think like not only for UX people, but for everyone in general, like to open Unity or whatever you feel more comfortable with. Like for me, it was Bitsy at the very beginning of my career, and just to experiment. And sometimes we see that tools are very simple, but I think that 90% of the time, the simplicity of something is what make us able to make great things. And in the case of Bitsy, it's something that it doesn't require any coding, and you can really test how things feel by playing that. Like lots of whatever, like user experience, game feel. Like I've learned everything there, and game logic. So in general, I always think that what it make us feel stuck with whatever game design, UX, whatever thing we want to learn is our fear of not being perfect at that. And that's how we don't start doing anything, because we feel like we are not gonna, like you say, but how I'm gonna learn this, or how I'm gonna do this or that. And that's how many people never start doing something. It's just because of the fear of not being perfect, but we are not perfect. So I think that for learning whatever, you really need to get into the thing, and like step by step, like at your own pace. But but they start doing tiny things and being consistent with what you do.
Yeah, like it's interesting you're saying like make your own games, because I've tried that a lot with like game jams and stuff. I haven't done anything on my own, but I've worked with other people in game jams, and that's where I kind of take on more of the testing role or the UX type of role, where I encourage like prototyping, or like if you've only got like a 40-hour game jam, then I'll kind of be like, okay, then I'll look at key questions and kind of prioritize what's really important in terms of usability and experience. And that's one way I get practice, or the fact that I'm self-taught when it comes to UX and bits of game design. I'm not calling myself a game designer because I don't know enough. But the way I've done that is through actually watching a lot of Let's Plays and stuff on Twitch. So just seeing how streamers respond to different parts of a game, or like, because you get like really good like emotional responses, and also some of them talk out loud as they're playing. It's like a really messy type of playtest, but it still does the job, and you can learn more about experience design through that. Or I break down games that I play and like kind of breaking down their experience in terms of game design. So I'll be like, well, if a player is enjoying this thing, that means it's going to impact how they interact with other systems down the line, right? So companies are kind of looking for those types of skill sets, with understanding like how you can fit into a team, but also if you understand how games are made. And I think that's why it's so important for us as UX people to collaborate with game designers, because they're the ones we're working with to create the best experience possible, but also the person that we're kind of going through technically to check ideas, and vice versa. Like we're always keeping each other in check to make sure the experience is really good. But thank you. I saw that we have a bunch of questions. So Celia, can we go through them? Or
Yes, you have a lot of questions.
thank you.
So do you need help for moderating this? I can start. I see that there was I had it right in front of me, and then of course I looked at something else. Tom had a question. Are there any sets of cognitive or behavioral heuristics that you see yourself using frequently when evaluating a feature or design? I'm curious if there's some type of thing like Nielsen-Norman heuristics that you might apply in a game's UX context.
Yeah, there's quite a lot. So some bigger studios will actually create their own sets of cognitive or behavioral heuristics based on the games they've made. Personally, I've actually used Celia's heuristics, actually posted a while back in a blog post. There were like 7 key usability heuristics, and they're the ones I actually started with. They're looking at things like form over function, consistency, signs and feedback, and there's 4 others as well. I can't say off the top of my head, but they're the types of things I keep in mind when I'm reviewing a feature. Some kind of like a checklist just in the back of my mind, and that ensures like we're creating a really functional and good experience. But also you'll find with more experiences, more experience in the industry, you'll kind of come up with your own heuristics, and the team will come up with their own heuristics as well. So like early on in development, a lot of teams will actually define, for example, when you're working with UI, they're probably going to have 4 key heuristics, or like goals that it needs to meet every time. And then you're using that as well when you're evaluating the feature. That's from my perspective anyway. I don't know if Marina, you use any types of principles or heuristics as well in your work.
I never done that before, but it's probably also because we don't have like a UX person normally, so like we never had the access to that kind of knowledge to put into our processes.
Mm-hmm. I think that means we should hire more UX people in games.
Yeah, we need to hire more UX people.
Basically.
I hate to do that because I know that I have some answers for this specific question. I'm just gonna put in the link. A article that I wrote about the process that that we've been using in Fortnite, and we use like a few of heuristics, and to define fun, we look into, because a lot of people, I saw someone saying that fun is everybody has a different definition of fun. So we look into engagement actually, and what makes things engaging. So what makes things motivating. So you'll have stuff in there. Okay, so I know that someone, Ariel, had a question, and I don't see your question in your Q&A, so now I need to scroll back up to see if I can find your question. Yeah, it was So there was a comment that you are killing it, both of you. This is a really cool fireside with a real fire, but the fire's died out. So well, it was question and thoughts on game design and UX, but I'm guessing that's it's covering everything you did here. Okay, so I'm just gonna go back to the Q&A section. So for those who ask questions, if you could just ask the name, put the name of the people you're asking the question to, because sometimes we can't answer the questions right away, and then it's longer to find out what question is for what panel. So I have one. Do you have examples of how UX and game design can collaborate early at the concept phase and use, i.e., motivation theory and player segments to help define overall experience and feature set? That's a big question.
Marina, do you want to start with that one?
I think that I don't know if I have super specific examples, but in one of the processes of my last projects, we were trying again, like without a UX expert person, but with our own UX UI knowledges, we were trying to put different documentation together around what was the kind of elements that we really wanted to pay attention to in terms of UX and UI. And like the process for UX was basically like testing is super important. We've been also talking about testing a lot today, and that was a big part. And we were doing, for example, lots of surveys and like asking the kids, because this was a project center for kids, like many questions. And then also we had a specific part for prototyping and testing with the kids involved in the process. So yeah, but like really like a very like really procedures on working with UX UI. I think I didn't have the opportunity to do that yet.
So the approach I've taken is just being very quick and scrappy, especially if we don't have a lot of time. So paper prototyping as a tool has worked really well for me. And the thing I kind of encourage is like, sure, engine is great, but sometimes we can just sketch out an idea and let's discuss it, especially if you can't connect with players in that moment. Let's use our expertise to make something, and let's test it with someone in the team who doesn't know much about this feature and see how they interact with it. So how do they respond to the interaction system? What, again, like you're saying, Marina, like what are their responses and emotions and things like that. I've done bits of player segmentation. So usually in the conception phase, I do a lot of stuff around, again, personas, prototype personas. And then when the game goes live, then you can kind of use behavioral segmentation to update those personas. But I find the personas work to kind of help with scoping and setting boundaries around a feature, because you are considerate of different player needs and motivations. I also do a lot of stuff around figuring out who our users are. So this is working with like the commercial and marketing team. Again, like I said earlier, like getting that market insight into the development team so they understand who that player is, to kind of build that empathy with them. Like something we discuss a lot in the industry is around like sometimes game developers fall into the trap of making games for themselves if the audience isn't people like them. So you kind of have a responsibility to remind them of this is who the player is, and this is the type of experience that they're looking for with a game like this, which might be different to yours. But there's a lot of testing you can do in the concept phase, I think, even if you don't have anything super polished and beautiful.
Sweet. I'm looking another question. So I'm trying to find questions that are directly for your panel, but then we can also move on to questions that can be useful for everyone from the previous panels. Okay, so here the Ariel's question. Nida and Marina, what has been the most difficult aspect of your jobs and how you've gotten over that?
So basically, this is super obvious, but I have one emotional difficulty and one technical difficulty. So my emotional difficulty basically was to overcome my imposter syndrome that when I was hired as a game designer, the first project, I just like at the beginning I was like, oh, like finally, right, like I got this role and I love my job and it's gonna be great. But then each time that I needed to present my stuff, I was thinking, oh no, this is shit, I'm the worst. How can I call myself a game designer? I'm not a game designer, I don't know what I'm doing. And that's like, it seems now I'm laughing, but I really had super difficult months with that. And I think it's also something that we all go through. It doesn't matter the discipline. And then the most difficult thing in terms of technically was when I get stuck into a scene because I have a mechanic stuck in my head and I don't know how to, that mechanics and sometimes how you have a game in your head is kind of like intrusive thoughts. It's somehow you have there, like you think you need to do that, but you know that it's not the right thing because there are better ways to do it, but you just didn't figure it out yet. Or worse, the creative director thinks that that's not good and you know that's good, but he says or she says this is not what I want, so you need to just like do whatever your boss says. So that's very difficult, and getting not stuck with something is a nightmare for me because it takes lots of emotional effort as well. So yeah.
Yeah, the imposter syndrome is really real, and I think in a lot of us as well. And it's just having that support system around you helps a lot. I think as long as you're still learning and growing, you're going to be fine, I think.
Yeah, and I have bad news for you that the imposter syndrome doesn't
No,
leave you ever.
one can hope.
But I mean, it's sometimes it's good also to think about it so that we can keep learning. Sorry.
No, I agree completely. So I think to Ariel's question, my thing is around one of the hardest things I faced is getting buy-in for UX. So even if you're hired as a UX person, it does not mean the job will be easy and smooth sailing. You will spend a lot of time evangelizing the discipline, I think, and helping people understand what it actually means and how it can help you or help them, I guess. So this is working closely with everyone. So whenever I join a new company, what I do is I speak to each person individually from different departments and figure out, okay, how much do they know about UX? What things don't they know and what areas do they need help with? And I kind of tackle it from there, figuring out like the small things that I can do to help them with their jobs day to day. So that might not even be wireframing stuff. It might just be being someone listening to them when they talk about a feature or like when they vent about something related to the feature. And that's still you being useful and helpful. But it is very much like going through a lot of the myths as well. Like when people talk about UX taking a really long time, which obviously isn't really true, or that it slows down development, but like showing the value of UX when it comes to that. So being like, okay, I'm going to come in and help you prototype this feature, and you're going to see how much time this will save us down the line through the testing and actually just doing a lot of the design thinking fairly early on. But that does require building a good rapport and trust with your team. It's kind of taking a lot of those small wins, I guess, and then slowly over time building a really robust and hopefully useful process for the team. And I think my second one, just quickly going into that, is actually managing documentation. I think design documentation people don't generally read. And the same can be said for a lot of UX documentation, especially if it is reports. So I would encourage people to visualize or create visualizations of the things that they're trying to explain. So what I do is the wireframes are great, but I also label them a lot as well. So anyone can go back into the file and better understand what I was talking about there to give some context. But I also like post a lot of references, or maybe we'll do an interactive workshop together on a board and draw some things together, just so people better understand the point I was trying to make or help them come to a decision together. But again, yeah, it's an ongoing process.
Still have a bunch of questions. So if you want to look at the Q&A section and answer the ones you want to answer, because I'm not sure we're gonna be able to answer them all, but I see one a short one here, so that you can answer this one while you look at the other Q&A. What makes it, so at Marina, what makes a UX designer invaluable for your team? And what do you think UXers pay more attention to help craft memorable experiences?
So I basically, I don't think like all the contrary. I think a UX designer would be super valuable for my team, but you know, like sometimes like the projects that I've been working with, they are many times people that struggle a lot finding funds for their projects, and that's a real thing, right? Like many times developers need to choose the professionals they can get on board first, and I also live that with my own company. Like we've been struggling for getting on board 3D artists because for months, because we didn't have money for that. So like that's a real thing, and it's not that it's not that it's not valuable for our team. It's just like the people that is managing our funds consider that they need other people more in the team at that moment. Like for example, a game designer. Like at the moment in the team that I'm working that has more funds, we basically are like the game design. Me as a game designer, the lead designer. We have a pedagogy person because we really need that person because we work with kids, and then we have the marketing team, and then but in the game team we are just us and a programmer, so a game developer, a Unity game developer, because they don't have more budget to hire that the rest of professionals we would really need. But that doesn't mean that it's not valuable for our team. It's super valuable. It's just that sometimes I guess that as a business person, you need to make some decisions, and you know, like sometimes they prioritize other roles over other roles, which is not good, and that's also what gives later a sense of the games industry as we only have game designers, because that's something that's been really a thing during years, that we only had game designers or programmers while we have lots of professionals that we need. But yeah, like it's not invaluable for my team. And I don't remember the second part of that question.
Me neither.
I'm looking for it.
Yeah, but at the same time, and I'm also getting folks back in when they cannot get back in. Okay, so I put it in the insert section, so maybe I can find it again.
There are lots of questions, basically.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and what do you think UXers pay more attention to help craft memorable experiences? See, I didn't memorize that part.
So I think that UX people pay more attention to how everything is configured together to make the memorable experience concretely. So like, for example, when I show my stuff to a person that was, you know, like that had more knowledge on UX, I noticed that they put more attention on how every element was, you know, like put into the game, and why, and asking questions like, why did you put this? Why, as Nida said earlier, like lots of questions like, do you think this is cool here? And what do you think? Like when I said like, oh, I want to just figure out this emotion. Okay, but what do you mean by this emotion? And you know, like it's lots of asking questions, and the UX person having lots of empathy, not only with the people that we want to make games for, but also with the game developer. It's what Nida said. Like I think that also that's why psychology people are very good at UX. It's because you are very really empathetic with everyone at the same time, and that feels really exhausting.
All right, I think we need to wrap it up. Is there something that you want to wrap up with, Marina and Nida?
I just want to say thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
No, it was a pleasure. It was really interesting to hear you talk about all your thought processes, and it's really interesting to me to hear that when I was not answering questions on the side. So thank you so much for taking the time to share your experience with us.